Hello and welcome. By 2025, the UN are hoping to have achieved a 50-50 gender split across all government and public life positions, which I think is an incredible goal and one that is very necessary to happen as soon as possible. If we look at business, the Fortune 500 CEOs in 2019, 15% of them were women. By 2021, we'd raised that number to 26%. That's pretty impressive. However, it's still 50% off where we need to be to get that gender split of 50-50. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And we want to be making sure that women and diverse leadership teams are present across government life, public life, commercial life, entrepreneurship. We want to be making sure that those diverse boards are there, those diverse leaders are there, so that we can continue to make the changes that are necessary and push forward the changes that we really, really need. So why is it important to have female leaders? Essentially, we need a seat at the table. It's been said before, but it's going to need to be said again and again and again until it's true, until we hit that 50-50 gender split. We need women at the table. We need to be able to educate boards and senior leadership teams about what's required for women to show up to work and do their best work. What does a working environment need to look like in order that that is possible? So education is a very, very important part. And if we're not there, we don't have a seat at the table, we can't educate. We need to be there as part of the decision-making process, because decisions are being made without women present, without their input, and therefore they're not necessarily benefiting people within the organisations that could do with the women's support. We need to be there to be facilitating change. We know we want the change needs to happen. COVID has in some ways helped and hindered this process, but we need to be there to facilitate the change that is absolutely necessary. We need to be there to be reflecting on the progress that we're making and continuing to adapt the changes that are necessary to policy, to process, to procedure, whatever it might be. We need to be there to be benchmarking, making sure these changes are happening. And if they are happening, reflecting on how well they are benefiting the people that those decisions are affecting. Because if they're not, then we need to adapt them again. We're all learning, so we may not make the perfect decisions the first time around. We need to be there because we need to avoid groupthink and unconscious bias that has happened in the past. We need to be there to disrupt that kind of thinking, to pose questions, not to be difficult, not to be aggressive, not to do anything other than challenge current thinking in the best way possible. And with a state of curiosity and like, I wonder if, and what would be possible if. So bringing a real kind of positive sense of possibility and change. So today we're going to talk about the leadership arc. So there are three very distinct phases that leaders go through as they are growing into their full potential. And it will really impact on our ability to step into these very senior positions. So I'm going to talk through these three levels so that you can get a sense of where you are on the arc, on the scale, and we'll also look at how you can raise yourself up, how you can leverage your skills, your mindset to move into the next level of leadership thinking and behaviour. So the three levels we're going to look at are the emerging leader, which is the very first phase, the connected leader, which is the second and middle phase, and the relational leader, which is the third and final phase, where we're really stepping into our real potential and ability to influence even when we're not in the room. And I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to give you three examples of three different clients to start with, so you can begin to perhaps relate to these levels in a much more personal way. So the first one is a client, R. She was lovely, a very competent leader, quite new to her role, but she was trying to do too much. She was trying to do it all, and she was becoming really exhausted by the process. She was literally still doing all the things. And she was making extra work for herself by trying to create ways that her team could feed back to her and update her on their projects, rather than turning that relationship around and saying, okay, well, you're a grown up, you have the responsibility of letting me know where you are in the project and how things are developing and happening. So she was still trying to do everything for everybody. So she was very much at that emerging stage, and it was extremely tiring. Her focus was on her, me as the leader. What am I doing to make sure that all this is happening in the right way at the right times? So there was a really big focus on her as the leader of this particular group. Now, the second client is F, and she was a connected leader. So the second stage. So she would move beyond that sense of it's just me, and she'd moved into a kind of there's me over here and there's you guys over there. There's the you and there's me and there's them. And I need them to be doing this and I need to be doing that. So whilst there was an awareness of the two groups, yourself and the group that you're leading, there wasn't necessarily a connection, a strong relational connection between the two. They were connected, but it wasn't fully focused. And what was really, really interesting here was that F was very good at talking to people, about relating to people, but did not like pushing back, did not like saying, no, this isn't enough, this isn't good enough, this isn't what we want, this isn't the direction we need to take. And so things would get quite far down the line before they would begin to fall apart and unravel a bit. So she began to practice pushing back earlier on with a kind of, this is really interesting, but it isn't really what we need to be doing. It's interesting, but not where we need to be going right now. And just pushing back very slightly. So there was a connection between her as the leader and the group that were needing to do the work. But she was able to say, no, not this, because remember, we're going over here. So she was drawing lines between what she needed, what the organisation needed, and what they needed to be doing. So beginning to connect up the dots of her team. And then finally, we have D, who was very much a relational leader. So she was very aware of the relationship between and in with herself as the leader, and between herself and the team, and all of them and the organization. So very strong connections, good relationships up and down the chain, good relationships across the team. But she'd been provided with a new opportunity. It was quite stretching for her and the team, not in terms of its complexity, but just in terms of all the other things they had to do as well. And she dropped back into trying to prove that she could do this, that she could do all these things, that she could spin all of these plates. And so she'd moved away from having a purely relationship with each of her team members and was much more into the doing part again, because she was trying to prove herself. She didn't want to inconvenience anybody, so she was taking on large chunks of this additional work because she didn't feel like it was fair to give that to her team, because she didn't want to push back to the upper management and say, actually, this is too much for us all. We need more team members, or we need more time. We can't do everything at once. So she took on the inconvenience to protect her team. And of course, that's going to lead to burnout very, very quickly. So what we needed to do there was reframe her relationship with the senior team and reframe her relationship with the team that she was managing, so that everybody was understanding what was possible and what was not possible, and the workload was spread as equitably as it was possible in that scenario. So you can see there's three kind of very distinct levels. So the first level is this emerging leader, where it's really about you. There's a second level, which is the connected leader, which is starting to understand there's me and there's them, and actually we're really connected together. We need to be doing different things, but we are really connected. And then the final one is the relational stage, where we are able to have a relationship within ourselves and understand who we are as the leader, a relationship with our team, and a relationship up to more senior members of our organization as well. And that relationship also relates to the goals, the strategy, the tactics that are going to be necessary for you to achieve what you need to achieve in this coming financial year. So let's take a deeper dive into each of those areas now. I'm going to start with the emerging leader. So if you are an emerging leader, you'll probably find that you are functionally amazing. You're really good at your job, which is why they gave you the leadership role, because they could see the level, the complexity, the nuance of your understanding in your old role. You really understood what was necessary. But as you've stepped into this new role, you understand that you're functionally brilliant. You know you're good at your job, but you don't quite know who you are as this new leader. It's like, what do I stand for? How do I relate to these people? Particularly if you've been promoted up and out of the pool of people, if you like. So you're now essentially leading your colleagues. That can lead to a scenario where you're like, well, I don't know where I fit now. I knew where I was. I knew how to relate to people when we worked together and we were peers. Now I'm the leader. I don't know where I fit. I don't know how I fit in this organization. I don't know what my leadership style is like yet. I don't know how to relate to people as a leader just yet. So you're moving from essentially being a manager and a producer into leading. So you've got to stop doing as much as you used to do. You'll still have lots to do for sure, but you're not going to be producing in quite the same way. And you're going to have to move into a being state. So who am I being as this emerging leader? And that is often quite a clunky, difficult journey because we've not really done it before, and we need to really think carefully about how that happens. So some of the issues that arise when we are in this emerging leader state is that we're trying to prove that we are really good at this new leadership role. And in the proving, we start doing. So we start doing lots of the things that we feel we ought to be doing as a leader, but they aren't necessarily things that you should be doing as a leader. They may be things, they may be hangovers from when you were producing. And so we start to take on more work. We do things that actually our team members could do. We expect them to, we want to protect them and not give them too much work because we want to be seen as a nice, considerate leader. And we certainly don't want to be seen as a slacker. Now, if we've moved from a very doing role into a leadership role, it can feel slacky to not be producing the entire time. But it's a really important reframe to understand that actually your role now is to help others be the best producers that they could be. That's very much part of your role. You still will have to produce work, but not in the same way that you did before. It can feel really easy because we don't quite know who we are. We don't quite understand our style as a leader. We don't understand necessarily, we haven't made decisions about how we feel about various projects and things that are going on in the organization. It can feel really easy to feel swayed by arguments. So if there's somebody in your leadership team who's incredibly good at arguing for X, you could feel yourself being pulled towards that argument because they're very persuasive. You then might hear someone else who's equally persuasive but has a different opinion and feel yourself being swayed towards that. So it's very easy to feel like you're constantly changing your mind about situations, constantly changing your opinion. And again, that's because we haven't quite sort of set our stall out yet. We don't quite know who we are in this emerging leader stage. And the final issue that we can feel at the emerging leader stage is that our boundaries are really leaky. And that's often because, again, we don't quite know where those boundaries are. So where does the boundary between me doing a good job as a leader and being available to my team stop, and my free time and my mental health and the care of me start? So that can be a really cloudy one. So we can end up answering emails late at night, early in the morning, at the weekends, so on and so forth. And our boundaries around that are really loose. We can end up taking things like taking work back. If it's not been done quite in the way that we need it to do, we'll just say, it's okay, give it to me, I'll fix it, because we need to get it done by blah, blah, blah. So the boundaries between what you expect of your team and what you expect of you become kind of weaker. They're looser, they're leaky. So the boundaries can become very flexible. I was going to say inflexible, but that's not what I mean. They become very flexible, and that can be really detrimental to you getting your leadership work done because you're still doing work that is producing work. Does that make sense? So what are the actions that you can take to stop these things from happening and to level yourself up to the next level? Well, number one is working on that sense of enoughness. So they gave you this leadership position for a reason. They gave it to you because they believe that you can do it. They didn't give it to you out of the kindness of their heart. So they see something in you that they really, really value. So working on your sense of enoughness as a leader, that you know enough right now. Obviously, you're going to keep learning, especially if you're at the beginning of this role. It's going to be a steep learning curve, but you know enough now to be able to do this. If you can work on that sense of enoughness, it will relieve the pressure that you feel to be doing and proving yourself the entire time. So even simple affirmations like, I make good decisions for my team. I am learning to make brilliant decisions all the time. I am learning more and more every day. I am stepping into the sense of being this emerging leader. Whatever feels good for you, you can do anything that is going to build up your sense of enoughness. The second thing is, if you feel like you are being pulled by arguments, it's being swayed to and fro, and you're not quite sure where you stand, one of the things that you can do is, when you listen to an argument, is kind of give yourself questions. So how do I feel about that? How does it stack up against X? If I was going to take the opposite opinion to that, what would it be? And how does that feel? So you can listen to an argument without 100% buying into it there and then asking yourself some really sensible, strategic questions about how you feel about the individual, their content, the argument, and how that might impact your team and how you feel about that before you decide, yes, I'm pro that argument, no, I'm against that argument. And you can do that every time you hear any kind of arguments, pro or con, against whatever it might be. So that may be a new project that you're taking on, new policies, new procedures, whatever it might be. So making sure that you really know how you feel as the leader of this particular group of people. How do you feel about it before you decide to go with whichever argument it is, and before you decide to voice your opinions on it. So you're very clear before you speak up. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change your mind. Absolutely. None of this is set in stone. And obviously, the more information you get, the more practice you get at implementing these things, you will learn all the time. And so you might realize 6 months down the line, actually, I was wrong about this. And really, I think this is the key. That's absolutely fine, as long as you're not just swaying because somebody else has been incredibly persuasive. If you're swaying because you've tried something and you've realized something, you've learned something, then that's amazing. And then the final thing is about your boundaries. So you can strengthen up your boundaries. And there's two things you can ask yourself here. So is it structural? Is there work that is coming into this particular team? Is there input that we are being stretched in particular ways that are structural, that I could do something about, that's going to make this easier? So is it just because you're working on a particular project, everybody's a bit strained because the deadlines are coming and everything, you've got a lot to do? So is it because of that? And if it is, what can you do to relieve that pressure and strain right now, here and now, in this moment? So then your boundaries can be kind of tightened up. It's like you say to the team, okay, right, nobody's answering emails at the weekend. We're working really long hours in the week. No one answers emails at the weekend, including me. What is it that you can structurally change that's simple and effective and isn't going to be a detriment to the project or the thing that you're working on, that is going to help everybody stay sane? And then the second thing about your boundaries is, and then make sure everyone sticks to it, you and the team. The second thing, is it a belief? So is it that you feel that you should be taking on more work because you're the leader and you feel badly for the team because they've got extra work at the moment? Because that's a belief. So we need to strengthen up those beliefs, those wonky thoughts that you have about leading and producing the work. Do we need to shore those up? So is it structural? Is it something you can do to change the environment, the way that you're all working at the moment? Or is it a belief, a wonky belief? And can you fix that? So that's the emerging leader. We're going to move on now to the connected leader. So as a connected leader, you generally know yourself better. So you've got an understanding of who you are as a leader now, and you're generally able to express your thoughts quite clearly about how you feel about different things, about your expertise. You're able to express yourself. So you're becoming much more connected with your sense of expertise and being able to connect with the people that you are talking to and listening to. you've got growing credibility. So people look to you for answers around your particular expertise. They want to know your opinion. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How is that going to impact so-and-so? So your people are coming to you to ask you questions more and more often. You know that you want better relational skills, particularly when things are feeling a bit stretchy, when things are feeling a bit complicated, when things are feeling political or nuanced. You know you don't feel quite as comfortable, quite as expert, quite as in control in those moments. And difficult conversations, whether that's about, underperformance, whether that's around unacceptable behaviours, whatever it might be, that feels stretchy, that feels difficult. And particularly if you've got to have that conversation up the chain of command. Across the chain of command, difficult. Down the chain of command, less difficult, but still feeling quite stretchy. So the issues here are generally if the conversation is quite nuanced, if it's a little bit complicated politically because there's different people involved and you've got to manage those stakeholders in ways that aren't necessarily straightforward. If you look at what you need to achieve and what they need to achieve, that can feel quite stressful. It can feel quite stretchy. You can feel like you get a bit of a wobble when there's pushback. So if you express your opinion about something that should or shouldn't happen, and people say, well, it's got to happen anyway, or this isn't, or I disagree with you, you can feel a little bit wobbly about your opinion. It's like, maybe I didn't get it right. Maybe I haven't done enough research. Maybe I don't understand this as well as I thought I did. So you can have a momentary wobble when you get a bit of pushback. And then the final thing, that mental divide between you and your work is not really there. So your personal value is tied up with the impact of your work. So if work is going well, you feel strong personal pride, strong personal values, strong personal value, I think is the right word here. Now, if you don't feel that, if work is not going so well and you've got your sense of self is very tied up with that, then that can drag your sense of self down. So at the connected level, these are some of the issues that I commonly see with leaders. So what can we do? Well, number one, we need to work on that sense of enoughness again, and your sense of enoughness that is separate from your work. So your ability to do your job really, really well is separate from your value as a human being, which is absolutely priceless. It isn't as bound up with this sense with what you produce at work as you might think. So working on the sense of enoughness as a human being that is separate from your work will really help in those moments when it's feeling a little bit stretchy, because it's like, okay, well, that's a work thing. Right? So that is separate from me as a human being and my value as a human being. Then the second thing is plan for those wobbles, plan for those pushbacks, plan for people to disagree with you. So if you're presenting an idea, you're asking for resources, you are selling a new concept to internally or externally to potential clients or stakeholders or strategic partners, expect pushback. Expect people to disagree with you. Expect people to not like your idea. So what would they say? What would they question? What will they be concerned about? Think about all those things and plan your answers to their concerns. So expect people to push back, because as you go higher up in an organization, it isn't going to be lots of easy yeses. There is going to be complexity. There is going to be nuance. There's going to be different stakeholders requiring different things from you and your team or the product that you're producing. So expect it, because if you expect it, you plan for it. And if you plan for it, then you are prepared when it comes up in the moment, and you're not going to be caught on the back foot and have that wobble. You can walk out that meeting and think, okay, they didn't say yes, but I dealt brilliantly with all their questions and concerns. And so the wobble is dissipated before it even has a chance to happen. Now, the last thing, when dealing with these difficult conversations, often we can feel like we have to go in and we have to sort the situation because we're the leader, we're in charge, it's our responsibility. And it is our responsibility, but it's our responsibility to co-create a solution with the person in the room, because we don't have all the answers. So often we can feel like we have to fix a scenario. But by going into these difficult conversations armed with a billion questions, so that we can really begin to dig under the surface and really understand what is going on, then we can come up with a better solution in conjunction with the person or people that we are talking to. So don't feel like you've got to know it all and have all the questions, but all the answers, but do feel like you're going to have all the questions, many questions as you could possibly have, that will help you really understand and get to grips with exactly what is going on with the people that you are talking to that's caused this difficult conversation to arise. So that's the second stage, the connected leader stage. So we're going to talk about now the relational leader, which is the third stage, where we're really stepping into your, I want to say power, your real potential at this point. So now you understand that your success and your team's success is really bound up with the success of your relationships, up and down the chain, across the chain, different departments, outside of the organization. Everything that you do that is going to be successful will be dependent on having a successful relationship with the person that you need to help you do the thing you need to do. So having successful relationships is really, really important, and you know that. And you're pretty good at creating those scenarios where the relationships are strong. Now, that doesn't mean you agree with everybody the entire time. That is not a good relationship. That is acquiescence, and that's not what we're aiming for. We can have pushback, we can have disagreement, but we're doing it to find its healthy opposition. We're doing it to find a better outcome. You know your style at this stage, and you feel authentic as a leader pretty much most of the time. There'll be new and different scenarios where you'll feel a bit stretched, like it's like, well, I don't really know who I am in this scenario, but you will come out the other side of it, you'll reflect on it, and you will be able to reproduce that in the future and kind of feel okay because you've done it once now. And you are pretty good in most conversations, but if it's highly political, if it's very highly nuanced, if we've got lots of competing needs and factors in a conversation, so there's multiple stakeholders that need complex and multiple solutions, then those conversations can still feel really quite challenging and stretchy, because you know what you need to achieve, and you're having to balance and help solve and find solutions for lots of different people, and that can feel really, really challenging. So the issues that you're likely to find at this stage are unknown conflict. So conflict you didn't know was going to happen. So most of the time we can plan for conflict, we can see it's coming, we can head it off at the pass, we can deal with it. But there will be moments now at this level of your leadership where that will come out of the woodwork. You didn't know it was there. You couldn't have planned for it. It will just spontaneously arise. So being able to deal with that kind of conflict in the moment and deal with it with grace is absolutely critical to maintaining this relational leadership style and ability. The second issue is influencing others, even when you're not in the room. So being able to have developed such a strong style, such a strong way of communicating with people, such a strong understanding of who you are, that you've communicated that to other people, that they will feel influenced by who you are and the decisions that you might make, even when you're not in the room. So those are the things that we really want to be fixing and thinking about at this stage. So what can you do? What are the fixes? What are the action that you can take in these scenarios if you're at that relational leader stage? Well, when it comes to unknown conflict, when it simply arises in the moment, the one thing you can do right there and then is choose your style. So choose your state, not your style. So what's the state, the mental state that I need to be in right now to deal with this conflict? So if somebody else is very angry, they're very upset, they are annoyed, perhaps they're shouting, perhaps they're being a little bit physically intimidating in that moment, what is the state that you can choose? I would say the state you want to choose is openness. You want to be open so that you can receive whatever it is that they're trying to tell you, knowing that the way that they're trying to tell you is not acceptable, but you're trying to hear what it is that they're really genuinely upset about. What is the underlying factor here that's causing them to be so unhappy and so upset. So being open and listening might be the best state you could choose there, rather than reacting, which is going to elevate your sense of annoyance, and suddenly we've got an escalating conflict. We don't want to do that. So maybe being open, maybe being really, really calm is going to be really important. It might be that you just need to equalize status. So if the other person is standing up and shouting, maybe you need to stand up too. Definitely don't raise your voice, but you maybe need to stand up and speak a little bit more directly and a little bit more loudly than perhaps you would normally, so that we're equalizing the status, and then you can mirror and sit the other person down by calming your voice down, calming your body language down, and then they will follow suit. So you choosing your state will dictate how that conversation goes. So very important, really quick thing you can do, not necessarily easy to implement, but very vital to controlling that situation. And then the second thing you can do is reframing. So when we get into these situations where we might have to make decisions that are going to inconvenience other people, that are going to make it difficult, we can't satisfy all of our stakeholders totally. We're going to inconvenience some people some of the time. How do we reframe that? So rather than thinking about it inconvenience, how do we think about this being the best decision for the most people, and then communicating that to the people that we are working with? So reframing those scenarios, because that's when we can start to be really influential, even when we're not in the room. Because that's what we really want to be aiming for. That's really what a relational leader is doing, is that they are influencing people when they're not in the room. They're behaving with grace under fire. And more than anything, that they understand that their results are driven by the quality of their relationships. So high quality relationships equal high quality results. So I hope you found that a really insightful trip across our leadership arc, from the connected leader, from the emerging leader right at the beginning, the connected leader in the middle, to the relational leader right at the end, when we're really reaching into our potential and power. Now, if you're interested in understanding how you're showing up as a leader, so what your executive presence looks like, so that's how you show up in terms of your clarity, your connection, your credibility. If you're really interested to know where you are, we've got this amazing scorecard for you to take. It's a few multiple choice questions. It doesn't take very long. And then you will get a very specific, personalized response to the answers that you give in your questionnaire. And that will give you an insight as to where you are, and more information on how you can fix and get to the next level, up level to the next level of executive presence. Now, if you're interested, it's called the Executive Presence Scorecard, and the link is down below in the description. And it's absolutely free for you to take. And I'd be delighted to send your response to you once you've answered your questions. Take care, and we'll speak really soon. Bye for now.